Then relax.
I am relaxed.
Sir, keep your hands where I can see them. The voice was firm, controlled, but already carrying an edge that didn't match the situation. Red and blue lights washed across the empty storefront windows lining East Harbor Boulevard, flickering rhythmically against the wet pavement. A light drizzle had started minutes earlier, turning the late-night street into a mirror of moving color. At 10:41 p.m. on a quiet Wednesday night, Officer Ryan Keller stepped out of his patrol SUV, believing he was handling nothing more than a routine traffic violation. Within an hour, that assumption would unravel completely. And within days, the footage from his body camera would be watched by millions. Before we go any further, take a second to look closely at this moment. A parked car, a calm driver, an officer approaching what should have been a simple conversation. There are no raised voices yet, no struggle, no chaos, just a normal traffic stop, the kind that happens thousands of times every night across the country. But sometimes, the smallest decisions create the biggest consequences. And tonight's story isn't just about what happened on a roadside. It's about how quickly authority, assumption, and pressure can collide, and how one moment can change multiple lives forever. If you enjoy real body cam breakdowns and stories that reveal what really happens behind these encounters, take a second right now to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It genuinely helps the channel grow, and it allows us to keep bringing you stories told with full context, not just headlines. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Officer Ryan Keller had been working night patrol for nearly 5 years in the city of Ridgeway. He wasn't a rookie anymore, but he wasn't a veteran either. Somewhere in the middle, experienced enough to feel confident, but still eager to prove himself during every shift. Coworkers described him as proactive. Supervisors sometimes used a different word, intense. Earlier that evening, dispatch logs showed nothing unusual. Noise complaints, a minor accident, a welfare check that turned out to be nothing. By the time Keller spotted the dark blue Infiniti sedan moving ahead of him, the night had been quiet enough to feel slow. He later reported that the vehicle drifted briefly across a lane marker without signaling. Minor violation, technically enforceable, not uncommon. He activated his lights. The Infiniti immediately slowed and pulled safely onto the shoulder. No hesitation, no attempt to leave, no sign of trouble. Inside sat Jonathan Reed, a 49-year-old man finishing a long day of meetings downtown. He wore a plain gray pullover, reading glasses resting on the dashboard beside him. Nothing about his appearance suggested importance, nothing suggested authority, and that detail would matter more than anyone realized. Keller approached on the driver's side, flashlight angled downward. Reed had already done everything instructors recommend drivers do. Engine off, window down, hands visible on the steering wheel. "Evening, officer," Reed said, calmly. "License and registration." The tone wasn't hostile, but it wasn't conversational either. "My wallet's in my back pocket. Is it all right if I grab it?" Slowly. Reed moved deliberately, narrating his actions, something people familiar with police encounters often do instinctively. Wallet out, registration retrieved, documents handed over. The exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. No argument, no tension, nothing remarkable. Back inside his cruiser, Keller ran the information. Clean record, valid insurance, local address. No warrants, nothing flagged. The name Jonathan Reed appeared on the screen, but Keller didn't recognize it. The system showed no alert or designation that would draw attention. To him, this was simply another driver. But something about the interaction lingered in his mind. Later testimony would suggest Keller felt Reed's calm demeanor came across as overly controlled. In reality, Reed was simply being careful, but perception often drives reaction. Questions that shifted the moment. Keller returned to the vehicle. "You didn't signal that lane change." Reed nodded politely. "If I missed it, I apologize." Where are you coming from? A city meeting. What kind of meeting? Public safety planning. The answer was honest, but vague. Keller's posture stiffened slightly. What does that mean? Community advisory work. We meet monthly. There was a pause, a small one, but it changed everything. Step out of the vehicle. Reed blinked, confused. For a traffic violation? It's not a discussion. Step out. Reed complied immediately. He stepped onto the sidewalk, rain lightly tapping against his shoulders. What's going on? He asked. Keller didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured toward the hood. Hands here. Reed hesitated, not refusing, just trying to understand. Officer, have I done something wrong? The question seemed to irritate Keller. Turn around. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. The encounter was no longer conversational, it was procedural and increasingly aggressive. Keller grabbed Reed's wrist to position him. The movement was sudden enough that Reed instinctively stiffened. I'm cooperating, Keller snapped. The body camera later showed Reed standing still, hands visible, posture compliant. But Keller interpreted tension as resistance. He attempted to pull Reed's arms behind his back. Reed lost balance slightly on the wet pavement. That single moment triggered a rapid escalation. Within seconds, Keller swept Reed's legs. Both men crashed to the ground. The impact echoed sharply through the microphone. Reed's shoulder struck first, then his head hit asphalt. Silence followed. For a brief moment, Reed didn't move. Keller pinned him, breathing heavily. I've got one resisting, Keller radioed. But the video would later tell a different story. Rain continued drizzling as Keller secured handcuffs. Reed appeared disoriented, blinking slowly. Blood began forming along his eyebrow. What? What is happening? Reed asked, quietly. No answer came. He was lifted upright and placed in the back of the patrol vehicle. Door shut, camera still recording. Inside the car, Reed sat alone, breathing unevenly, trying to regain orientation. Outside, Keller searched the infinity, and that's when everything changed. On the passenger seat sat a leather folder. Inside were printed briefing documents. At the top of the first page, City of Ridgeway, Office of Public Safety Administration. Below it, Director Jonathan Reed. Keller froze. He checked the license again, then the paperwork, then back toward his patrol car. Realization arrived slowly, then all at once. Jonathan Reed wasn't just a driver. He was the civilian official responsible for overseeing police operations citywide. The man in handcuffs was effectively his boss, and every second had been recorded. Keller stood motionless in the rain. Traffic passed quietly behind him. Inside the patrol car, Reed sat injured and confused, not aware that the officer outside had just realized the magnitude of what had happened. Because at that moment, the traffic stop stopped being routine. It became evidence, and the consequences were only beginning. For nearly 20 seconds, Officer Ryan Keller didn't move. Rain tapped steadily against the hood of the Infiniti, while the glow of his flashlight trembled slightly in his hand. The folder remained open, its contents impossible to misunderstand. Jonathan Reed, not a coincidence, not someone with the same name. The man sitting handcuffed in his patrol car was the city's public safety director, the civilian official responsible for reviewing departmental conduct, policy enforcement, and officer accountability. Keller swallowed hard. The realization didn't arrive as panic at first. It arrived as disbelief. He replayed the last 5 minutes in his mind, the commands, the takedown, the radio call claiming resistance. Every word was now permanent, recorded, time-stamped, unchangeable. Keller closed the folder slowly and placed it back on the passenger seat, exactly where he had found it, as if careful placement could somehow undo what had already happened. He turned toward his cruiser. Inside, Jonathan Reed sat leaning slightly to one side, breathing through his mouth. Blood had dried along the edge of his eyebrow, and his glasses were no longer on his face. The flashing emergency lights filled the interior with alternating red and blue shadows. Keller opened the rear door. "Sir," he began, voice noticeably different now. Reed looked up slowly. "Yes?" There was no anger yet, only confusion and pain. Keller hesitated. "Are you Director Reed?" A long silence followed. Reed studied him carefully before answering. "Yes," he said quietly, "I am." The weight of confirmations settled instantly. Keller stepped back, as if the words themselves had physical force. Bodycam footage would later show Keller pacing beside the vehicle, one hand resting on his forehead. Training manuals often describe moments when officers must quickly reassess situations, but nothing prepares someone for realizing they have violently detained a senior official during a minor traffic stop without clear justification. Keller reached for his radio, stopped, lowered it again. Dispatch still believed he had a resisting suspect in custody. Backup units could already be en route. Every second of hesitation made the situation worse. Inside the patrol car, Reed finally spoke again. "I need medical attention," he said calmly but firmly. That sentence snapped Keller back into motion. He radioed for a supervisor and requested an ambulance, his voice tight and controlled. He did not explain why, only that assistance was urgent. Those next minutes stretched endlessly. Passing cars slowed as drivers noticed the scene. Rain intensified, tapping harder against metal and glass. Keller stood beside the cruiser, no longer searching, no longer speaking, simply waiting. Inside, Reed leaned his head back carefully against the seat, eyes closed briefly. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't threatening, and somehow that quiet composure made the moment heavier. 6 minutes later, Sergeant Angela Morris arrived. Her patrol unit pulled in sharply behind Keller's vehicle. She stepped out quickly, already sensing something unusual from the urgency in his call. "What's going on?" she asked. Keller didn't answer directly. He simply gestured toward the back seat. Morris opened the door. The instant she recognized Reed, her expression changed completely. Shock first, then disbelief. "What happened here?" she asked sharply. Reed answered before Keller could. "I was pulled over for a traffic violation, and things escalated." Morris immediately removed the handcuffs. She crouched slightly, examining his injuries. "We've got medical on the way," she said. Reed nodded once. Keller stood several feet away, silent. The ambulance. Paramedics arrived minutes later. Their calm professionalism contrasted sharply with the tension hanging in the air. They assessed Reed's head injury, checked his pupils, and guided him onto a stretcher. One paramedic quietly asked what had happened. Morris answered carefully, "Use of force incident, under review." Keller watched as the ambulance doors closed. For the first time since the stop began, the scene became quiet again. But the real storm was just beginning. News traveled faster than official reports. By the time Keller returned to headquarters, rumors were already spreading through hallways and patrol rooms. An officer had injured a senior city official. Some didn't believe it. Others immediately guessed who was involved. Keller sat alone in a supervisor's office, uniform damp, hands clasped tightly together. No phone, no conversation, just waiting. 3 hours passed before internal affairs investigators arrived. The interview room felt smaller than usual. A recorder clicked on. Keller was read his rights, the same procedural script he had delivered to others countless times. He agreed to speak without an attorney present. At first, his answers came quickly. "Yes, I initiated the stop. Yes, the driver complied. Yes, I ordered him out of the vehicle." "Why?" Keller struggled. "I felt something was off," he said. Investigators asked what specifically. He couldn't explain. When shown still images from the Bodycam footage, the silence grew longer. The video showed compliance.
Slow movements, no aggression. The word resistance became harder to defend. Meanwhile, Reed sat in a hospital room under bright fluorescent lights. Doctors cleaned the wound above his eye and confirmed a concussion. Bruised shoulder, minor facial fractures avoided by inches. Medical staff documented everything carefully. Photographs, measurements, timestamps. Reed's wife arrived shortly after midnight. Her shock quickly turned to anger, but Reed remained calm. "This will be handled properly," he told her, and he meant it. Before sunrise, command staff reviewed the Bodycam recording. Twice, then a third time. The room remained silent during playback. Every instruction, every movement, every impact. There was no ambiguity. Policy violations appeared obvious even before formal analysis began. One commander reportedly said quietly, "This is going to be public," and everyone in the room knew he was right. By morning, senior city officials were informed. The mayor received a direct briefing. Legal advisors immediately became involved. The question was no longer whether the incident was serious. The question was how serious the consequences would become once the public saw it. Because, eventually, they would. They always do. Within days, rumors leaked to local reporters. A headline appeared online.
Senior city official injured during police stop. Details were limited, but curiosity exploded. Community groups demanded transparency. Civil rights advocates requested footage release. Department leadership faced a difficult decision: delay disclosure and appear secretive, or release the video and face immediate backlash. Reed made the decision himself. Transparency, he said, mattered more than comfort. The video goes public. 5 days after the incident, the footage was released. Within hours, it spread across social media platforms. Millions watched. The moment of the takedown replayed endlessly. Comment sections filled with debate, anger, and disbelief. One question appeared repeatedly: if this could happen to someone in power, what happens to everyone else? The incident stopped being local news. It became a national conversation. Inside his apartment, Keller watched the footage himself for the first time since the investigation began. He saw the encounter not through adrenaline, but through distance, through clarity, through consequence. And for the first time, he seemed to understand that the traffic stop had ended long ago. Now, the judgment had begun. The video didn't fade away after a few days. It grew. Every repost brought new viewers. Every reaction video pulled the story into another audience. Analysts slowed the footage frame by frame. Former officers debated tactics. Attorneys discussed policy violations. And for Officer Ryan Keller, there was no escaping it. The moment that lasted less than 4 minutes on a rainy roadside had become permanent. Inside Ridgeway Police Headquarters, the atmosphere changed almost overnight. Officers who had once joked casually in briefing rooms now spoke quietly in corners. Supervisors avoided speculation, but everyone had seen the footage. Some defended Keller privately, arguing that split-second decisions were difficult to judge afterwards. Others said what many citizens were already saying publicly: nothing in the video justified what happened. Command staff faced another problem. The incident was no longer about one officer. It had become a referendum on the department itself. Questions surfaced quickly. Why had prior complaints against Keller resulted only in warnings? How were escalation decisions reviewed? And most importantly, how many similar encounters had never been recorded or released? 10 days after the incident, the department announced Keller's suspension without pay pending investigation results. His badge, firearm, and patrol access were revoked. For the first time since joining the force, he was no longer an active officer.
The announcement triggered immediate media coverage. Outside headquarters, reporters waited daily, hoping for statements. Department leadership remained careful and brief. The investigation is ongoing. No further comment. But behind closed doors, investigators were moving quickly. The Internal Affairs report took 3 weeks. It examined Bodycam footage, radio transmissions, training history, and witness testimony. The conclusions were blunt. Keller had 1. Escalated a routine traffic stop without clear justification. 2. Used force inconsistent with departmental policy. 3. Failed to properly assess compliance. 4. Reported resistance not supported by video evidence. 5. Delayed requesting medical assistance. Each violation alone carried serious consequences. Together, they formed a pattern impossible to ignore. The recommendation: termination. 31 days after the stop, Ryan Keller was officially dismissed from the Ridgeway Police Department. But administrative discipline was only the beginning. The district attorney's office conducted an independent review. Prosecutors focused on one element above all others: the discrepancy between Keller's radio report and what the video clearly showed. A grand jury convened quietly. 2 weeks later, charges were announced: assault under color of authority, filing a false official report, violation of civil rights. The arrest happened early in the morning at Keller's apartment.
No cameras were present, but word spread quickly. The officer who had once conducted arrests now stood on the other side of the process. He posted bail later that afternoon. Trial was scheduled 4 months away. Jonathan Reed returned to work sooner than many expected. A faint scar remained above his eye, partially hidden beneath glasses. His shoulders still limited certain movements, and headaches lingered from the concussion. But he insisted on returning. At his first press conference, he stood beside city leaders and addressed the public directly. "What happened to me," he said calmly, "should not happen to anyone." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't attack Keller personally. Instead, he spoke about systems, training, accountability, culture. He acknowledged something that surprised many viewers. "I held oversight responsibility," he admitted, "and that means I also share responsibility for what allowed this to occur." The statement shifted the conversation. This was no longer only about punishment, it was about reform. Within weeks, sweeping changes began. Complaint reporting procedures were redesigned so citizens could submit reports online, by phone, or anonymously. Use of force reviews required independent civilian oversight. Officers received mandatory quarterly de-escalation training rather than annual seminars. Supervisors were required to intervene earlier when patterns of aggressive behavior appeared. Interestingly, complaints initially increased by nearly 40%. City officials considered that a positive sign. People finally believed they would be heard. 4 months later, the courtroom filled early. Media crews lined the hallway. The prosecution opened with simplicity. They played the Bodycam footage. No dramatic narration, no emotional argument, just the video. Jurors watched silently as the encounter unfolded. Calm compliance, escalating commands, the takedown, and the radio call claiming resistance. The defense argued Keller feared for his safety. Prosecutors asked a single question repeatedly: what specific action created that fear? The answer never became clear. When Reed testified, his tone remained measured. He described confusion more than anger. "I believed I was cooperating. I still don't understand why force became necessary." The defense suggested he should have identified himself immediately as a city official. Reed paused before responding. "I shouldn't need a title to be treated appropriately." The courtroom fell silent.
The jury deliberated for just under 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing followed 3 weeks later. The judge addressed Keller directly. "Authority is granted to officers because the public trusts restraint," he said. "When restraint disappears, trust disappears with it." Keller received a 2-year prison sentence with eligibility for parole after 8 months. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. His career ended that day. Time moved forward. Public attention faded gradually, replaced by newer stories. But inside Ridgeway, the impact remained visible. Use of force incidents declined the following year. Community meetings grew larger. Officers reported feeling more scrutiny, but also clearer expectations. Reed began participating in ride-alongs again, not as oversight, but as observation. He later said experiencing the other side of policing changed him permanently. For decades, he had enforced policy. Now he understood its human consequences differently. After serving 8 months, Keller was released on parole. He gave no interviews, no public statements. When asked what should have happened instead, the answers were consistent. Slow down, communicate, de-escalate, listen. Because the tragedy wasn't that a high-ranking official was injured. The tragedy was how ordinary the situation looked before it went wrong. At a community forum near his retirement, Reed was asked what the incident taught him. He thought for a moment before answering. "It showed me how thin the line is between authority and accountability, and how quickly that line disappears when assumptions replace patience." The scar above his eye remained faint but visible, a reminder not just of one night, but of a system forced to confront itself. If this story made you think differently about what happens during everyday encounters, take a moment to support the channel. Like the video so more people can see stories told with full context. Subscribe if you want more long-form Bodycam breakdowns that go beyond headlines and show the human side of these moments. Because sometimes the most important lessons don't come from dramatic crimes. They come from ordinary situations that should have ended peacefully, but didn't. And those stories deserve to be told completely.